Claremount Boulevard is an upscale cul-de-sac, located about 20 minutes down from my non-upscale street. The families who occupy the houses are the kind that own fancy SUVs and send their kids to camp for the summer. All the dads play golf, and all the moms get together for brunch at some fancy overpriced downtown restaurant, then come back home and spend the rest of their afternoons tanning in their backyards, while their lawn keepers trim the hedges to look like swans. It's not a place where I would usually be if it weren't for the fact that I babysat for one of those families, the Berkeleys. My friend Myra set me up with this job. She teaches gymnastics to children and knows a bunch of families who are in need of babysitters. Asked me to take the job so that she would be able to go to Disneyland with her new boyfriend. I agreed, seeing as though I had just quit my job and was in desperate need of money in order to pay for my upcoming semester at university. The Berkeleys had offered me $17 an hour to babysit their 8-year-old twins, Rachel and Ryan. Apparently their summer camp had been canceled last minute due to some accident with some of the camp leaders or something like that. The job is pretty simple. I leave my house at 8:10 a.m. and I'm at the Berkeleys by 8:30. When I get there, Mr. Berkeley leaves for work, while Mrs. Berkeley gets ready to leave for her yoga class. The kids are already up at this time, eating breakfast. At 8:55, Mrs. Berkeley leaves as well. I'm alone with the kids until around 1:30 p.m. But I don't actually leave the house until around 3 p.m. because Mrs. Berkeley tells me that she really needs a break after her stressful errands. I'm not complaining though. I'm making a decent amount of money for doing the bare minimum. I don't really even have to do much besides making the kids lunch and washing a few dishes. We spend the majority of the time watching movies or playing games. Sometimes they beg me to get in the pool with them, which of course I do. I actually do like this job, and I'm getting paid a lot more than I was at my old job where I was yelled at by old people all day long. So this is definitely a step up. Besides, it's a very nice neighborhood where nothing bad ever really happens. Until today, that is. Today at around 10 a.m., while I was sitting outside on one of the lawn chairs by the pool, Brian and Rachel splashed around in the water. I noticed it was starting to get a bit cloudy. I could barely see what I was doing, so I took off my sunglasses, only to realize that it was actually pretty dark outside. I glanced up at the sky to see some dark clouds rolling in and the summer breeze turning into a chilling wind. "Hey guys, it looks like there's a storm coming. We should head inside for a bit," I called to the kids. They looked up at the sky as well, and then swam over to the steps, climbed out of the pool. I carefully stuck my feet back into the sandals and tried to walk quickly back inside. I closed the door behind me as Rachel and Ryan shivered, their blonde curls sticking to their faces. I grabbed their towels from the table near the door and wrapped each of them up, sending them away to take a warm shower as I made sure the doors and windows were closed. While I waited for the kids to get dressed, I looked out the sliding glass door as it slowly got darker and darker outside. It looked as if the sun was setting, but without any of the proper colors, and more like if the sun was moving further and further away. The sound of the doorbell echoed through the house, making me jump. I stepped away from the door and slid the curtain back into place as I walked down the hallway and into the living room. I opened up the doors to see Mrs. Kleppen standing on the front porch in her running shoes. "Yeah?" I asked. "I came to check on the children," she said in her very fake, concerned tone. "They're in the shower," I replied. Mrs. Kleppen stood up on her tiptoes and peered over my shoulder into the house. She blinked rapidly at me, which was Mrs. Kleppen's language for, "I don't like poor people in my neighborhood." "Anything else?" I asked. "I think that you should go home. It isn't safe in these conditions, and there appears to be a storm rolling in," she said. "Well, if it isn't safe, then why would I drive?" She took a deep breath, staring at me the entire time. "Fine," she whispered. "I'm going to call Celia. I don't think she would be comfortable with someone like you being in charge of her children during this dangerous weather." "Someone like me," I repeated. "Oh, don't get offended. You know what I mean." She waved her hand towards me as if she was shooing away a fly. "No, actually, I don't know what you mean," I said. You come from a different family, you wouldn't understand," she said. "Okay, look, I have to go babysit these kids, and I don't think Celia would be very happy about you distracting me from my job. Have a nice day, Mrs. Kleppen." I shut the door in her face as she started to say something else. I walked over to check on the kids and found them in the TV room, trying to get the TV to work. "I don't think it's going to work, guys. I think the storm might have messed with it." Ryan turned the TV off. "Well then, what are we supposed to do?" he asked. We can play other games. You guys want to play Uno? I asked. I guess, Rachel mumbled. Well, we don't have to. You can choose, I said, sitting down next to her. I want to swim more, she said. Maybe we can go back out after the storm, I suggested, although from the looks of it, it didn't appear to be any time soon. It was still getting darker outside, more so by the second. In fact, there seemed to be some sort of fog out there or something. I couldn't even see the trees that was a few feet out of the window anymore. I stood up and peered outside, squinting in order to see anything at all. The houses were almost completely dark, and I couldn't really make out anything except very dimly lit windows from one side of the house across the street. I could see some sort of movement a few feet away, and as I got closer, I could see that it was Mrs. Kleppen. I rolled my eyes. How crazy was this woman that she was outside in this storm just so that she could find some way to get me to leave? What are you looking at? Ryan asked. I turned around. Mrs. Kleppen's out there, just walking around, I said. Maybe she's lost, Rachel said. Yeah, maybe, I replied. I looked out the window again, but I saw nothing at all. Only darkness. Hey, Ryan, why don't you go turn on some lights? I want to call your mom and let her know about the storm, I said. I grabbed my cell phone and I dialed Miss Berkeley. She picked up on the third ring. Hey, Rosa. Hey, how's it going? She asked. Pretty well, but there's some kind of storm coming in right now. I don't know how far away you are or if you could see it, but it's completely dark out here right now. I just wanted to let you know that it's probably not safe to drive over here until it clears up, I said as I watched Ryan and Rachel grab some coloring books and crayons from a shelf. All right, thanks for letting me know. You keep the kids inside and give me a call when it clears up. I'll call my husband. We hung up, and I spent the next few minutes coloring with the twins. About 5 minutes into it, the doorbell rang again. Stay right here. I'm going to go see who it is, I replied. I walked out to the living room and peered out the window. But I couldn't see anything. Not even the plants that sat on the front porch. Suddenly, Mrs. Kleppen's face popped up, pressed against the window as she banged on the glass. Jesus! I snapped, jumping back, my heart pounding as she continued to bang on the glass. Yoo-hoo! She called. I rolled my eyes and pulled the curtain back again. Yes? I asked. She smiled at me, which I had never seen her do before. I was coming to check on you, she said, still smiling. We're fine, I replied. She kept grinning. What was with this woman? Are you okay? I asked. Oh yes, I'm terrific. It's lovely out here, isn't it? I looked around at the darkness that surrounded her. Yeah, that's one way to look at it, I replied. You should come out here and bring the children. She grinned. No, I don't think so. Mrs. Berkeley wouldn't like that, I replied. Oh, come on, it's lovely outside right now. Come out here, bring the children with you, she said. I'm gonna go check on the kids, I said. I closed the curtain and I walked back to the TV room, but I could hear Mrs. Kleppen knocking on the window, frantically. Who was it? Ryan asked. Mrs. Kleppen, she's being weird, I said. She's always weird. Mommy says she's nosy, Rachel said. Yeah, your mom's right, I replied. We managed to entertain ourselves for the next hour or so until Ryan and Rachel got hungry. We made our way to the kitchen, turning on lights as we went, so that we could see our way around the house. I made them some sandwiches as we sat around the kitchen table as they ate. When they were done, I washed the dishes and put them away, and then we made our way back to the TV room. When we passed the living room, the doorbell rang again. Stay here, they said. I walked over and once again peered out the window. It was pitch black outside. I wasn't able to see anything. Rosa, it's me. Can you open up the door? Mrs. Berkeley said. I reached for the doorknob, but then I stopped. Wait, what happened to your keys? I asked. What? She replied. Your keys, don't you have them? Oh, no, I forgot them when I left, she replied. Please open the door right away. I need to see the children. If you don't have the keys, how did you get here? I asked. There was something off about this whole thing, and while it was probably this fog that was making me paranoid, it was better to be safe than sorry. Besides, I hadn't seen Mrs. Berkeley at all. I'd only heard her knocking and her voice, and even though I couldn't see outside, I would have at least heard her car driving up into the garage, where she always parked. So what was she doing knocking on the front door? What do you mean, how did I get here? She asked. If you don't have your keys, how did you drive your car? I asked. That doesn't matter. Let me in. I need to see my children, she snapped, rattling the doorknob. I didn't reply, and I stepped back from the door. Let me in, she shouted. I looked over at the kids and motioned for them to be quiet and go back into the TV room. They nodded and hurried down the hall. I'm sorry. I can't let you in. I'm not sure it's you, I said. A banging sound on the window made me jump. I could see that someone pressed up against the other side, but I wasn't able to make out any details without pulling the curtain aside. I was right. It wasn't Mrs. Berkeley, it was Mrs. Kleppen again. Listen here, you bitch! Let me into this house right now, and I swear to God, I will kill you when you come out. Do you hear me? I will kill you, she snarled. She even sounded like Mrs. Berkeley. What was going on? I backed away from the window, letting the curtain fall into place. I ran back to the TV room. I had no idea what was going on out there, but something was not right. Mrs. Kleppen was crazy for sure, but not that crazy. I had never seen her like that. It was almost as if it wasn't even her that was in control of herself. I called the police, who told me they would try to send someone down here. I warned them about the fog outside, and they told me that an officer was on the way already. I stopped looking out the window whenever the doorbell rang, even though it didn't stop for about 20 minutes straight. But the police never showed. I could tell the kids were scared, even though they were acting like they weren't bothered. We sat in silence, staring at the coloring books in front of us. And suddenly there was a knock on the window. The kids stared at me and then over to the window. That particular window in the TV room was located towards the back of the house in the backyard, which meant that whoever was knocking on the window had climbed over the side gate and into the backyard. Kids, it's Dad. Open the door. I looked over at Ryan and Rachel, who looked as confused as I felt. I knew that Mr. Berkeley worked about an hour away from here, and there was no way he'd be back at home before his usual time. I grabbed my phone and sent Mrs. Berkeley another text, asking her if her and her husband were on the way home. She replied rather quickly, telling me that she was staying put until the fog cleared out, and that her husband was in a business meeting. So who was outside? Please bring the children out here, the person outside the window said. It sounded like Mr. Berkeley again, but I was getting a weird feeling about this. I put a finger over my lips, and we slowly got up and made our way out of the room. I know you're there, the voice shouted. Bring the kids out! We kept going down the hall until we got to Mr. Berkeley's office, where I shut the door. What's going on? Rachel whispered. I don't know. But that's not your dad out there, I replied. Then who is it? And why does it sound like him? Ryan asked. I shrugged. Stay here. I walked out into the hallway and peered into the TV room. Whoever was outside the window was still knocking. They weren't saying anything. I could hear a car starting outside somewhere and heard it racing down the street, and suddenly it was silent again. And I made my way down to the office. I opened the door and I looked around the room. Where's Ryan? I asked Rachel, who was sitting on the couch. He went to the bathroom, she said. I looked down the hallway to the bathroom, but the door was wide open. And there was no one in there. The sound of a door slamming shut from the other end of the hall made me look over just in time to see it close as Ryan ran out. I looked back at Rachel. Come here. You're going to grab onto my arm, and you're not going to let go, okay? I said. She nodded, wide-eyed, as she grabbed my arm. And we made our way to the kitchen at the end of the hall. I pulled the door open, letting in a harsh, cold wind. I flicked the switch, turned on the lights in the backyard, but there was nothing but small dots in the distance. Crap, I mumbled. Where's Ryan? Rachel asked. I don't know. Hey, I heard him call. Ryan, where are you? I asked. I don't know. I can't see. His voice seemed to be coming from all directions all at once. Just follow my voice, okay? Come on, I can hear you, I called out into the darkness. I kept talking out into the darkness until Ryan finally emerged right in front of me. I grabbed him and I dragged him inside, locking the door behind me. Just as Joel Sanders from down the street ran right into the door. Jesus, I breathed as I jumped. It's Joel, Rachel said as I watched him press up against the small glass window in the door, grinning up at me. Hi, Joel said. Hey. I watched as he shifted his eyes over to Rachel. I grabbed her and pulled her behind me. "Can Rachel come out to play?" he asked. Not right now," I replied. "Come on, let her out," he said, still grinning. "Maybe later, Joel. You should go home. It's not safe out here." Joel banged on the glass with his head and the palms of his hands. "Let her out!" he screamed. I pulled Rachel back and we all ran back into the office. We sat there as different neighbors knocked on windows and doors around the house, shouting. After what felt like years, everything got quiet. Ryan pointed to the window. "Look." I turned to see it was clearing up outside. I walked over and slowly pulled the curtain away. The sun was back and there was no one outside. I took the kids with me, and we all walked over to the living room as I opened the front door and looked out into the street. I gasped and I pushed the kids back inside, shutting the door again. "What is it?" Rachel asked. It's nothing," I replied. We walked inside the house in silence for a while, until finally the front door opened and Mr. and Mrs. Berkeley came inside, rushing towards their kids and hugging them. "What happened out there?" I asked. Mrs. Berkeley exchanged a look with her husband but didn't answer me. "Stay here," she said. "I'll be right back to pay you." They took their kids with them as they left me in the living room, curious about what I had gotten a glimpse of before I walked out the front door and onto the driveway. There were bodies everywhere. On the street, on the front lawn, everywhere I looked was a dead body. I kept walking down the driveway and onto the sidewalk, keeping a distance between me and the bodies as I walked around to my car. I jumped in when I almost tripped over a body right behind it. I averted my eyes quickly, but the image was already burned into my brain. The body, it didn't have a face. I took a deep breath and I made myself look again, and I realized that I had no idea who it was. I almost knew everyone in the neighborhood. I forced myself to look at a few others. None of the bodies had a face. I was able to recognize one, however. The tracksuit and the shiny blonde ponytail was unforgettable. Mrs. Clappin, who was on the Berkeley's front yard. Dead. As I looked down the street, I recognized something else. There was a car in the middle of the road. The front and back of the car was completely destroyed and dented inwards. I walked over to the driver's side and I looked in to see a body there and in the passenger seat. Their faces were missing, but I knew for a fact I recognized the car. I turned around and I ran back to the Berkeley's house, calling for Rachel and Ryan. No response. I ran into the backyard and tripped over the body of the two boys with missing faces. "Rachel!" I shouted. "Rachel!" I screamed. But again, there was nothing. I ran around the house and back to the front yard where I got into my car and backed out of the driveway, wincing as I went over the body that was back there. As I pulled out into the street, I looked into the rearview mirror and almost screamed. In my back seat, there was a body of a little girl who was missing a face. Hey there once again, kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I just wanted to give you a big thank you for watching tonight's video. If you guys ever wanted to help support the show, you can always do so if you watch the show on youtube.com/MrCreepyPasta or find the MrCreepyPasta Storytime podcast on iTunes, on Google Play, and on Spotify. And also, if you ever want to check out my wife's tea shop, it's etsy.com/ivorymonocletea, where she sells hand-blended herbal teas in the theme of Dungeons & Dragons and Harry Potter and Final Fantasy and the like. You can find the link for it, as well as many, many, many other links in the description down below. And, drumroll please, a big, big, big thank you to everybody supporting me at patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta. People such as Taysia-lynn, Genobaga-Arneho, Daniel Poulsen, Trace Miles, Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Wayne Milstead, Dr. Strawberry, Champinski, Ken Lando Higuchi, Brianna Tine-Janzen, Nicholas Saeid Elyasin, Buddy Burroughs, Stephen Van Huss, Kai Albertson, Goonington, G. Weevil 3, Chance Burnett, Diane Kraus, Asia, Gabrielle the Baca, TheRedOakShieldVirus, Sindee Barney, Titty Connoisseur, really? Titty Connoisseur? Melissa Swagart, Dante Rao, Last Blade Song, Cross Rights, The Ginger Bros, Eliminator 86, Andrew Steinberg, Jason Sistma, Holy Realm, and Rafael Rodriguez. Thank you so much to you guys out there on Patreon, to all of you listening to either the podcast or the YouTube show. And that is everything, guys. Thank you so much for listening, and sweet dreams.